Hello and welcome to our Minds and Money 5 at 5 show. This week's episode is sponsored by Oriole Resources and brought to you in association with RGN Resource Global Network. For those of you attending 5 at 5 for the first time, the aim of 5 at 5, 5 guests at 5 p.m, is to maintain engagement between investors and miners through a lively, interactive format during the current situation. A few admin announcements before we start. To make it as interactive as possible, please have your video switched on. To ask a question, you have two options. You can either A, submit them via the chat function, which is at the bottom of the screen, or even better, you can go and wave your hands via the invite participants function. We can go and unmute you and you can ask your question live. And being towards the end of the week, we invite you to bring along a glass of wine or beer to relax, sit back and enjoy. We will also be having some polling questions throughout the webinar where you can go and vote. So let's, Elaine, if we can perhaps bring up our first polling question onto the screen to go and get the ball rolling. And the question coming up on the screen now is, which CEO in the mining industry do you most admire? The four names I put up here are the names that get mentioned most to me when I'm researching events. So apologies to Tim and also to George for you not being on the sort of list. You're welcome to go and nominate yourselves when I kind of like ask you for your answers. And if I haven't mentioned one of your sort of top CEOs, please feel free to post them into the chat room box below. Whilst you're voting, let me please introduce this week's guests. We've got a star-studded lineup of guests. We've got Michael Colligan, partner Natural Resources Private Equity at Blue Lakes Advisors, Tim Livesey, Chief Executive Officer of Oriole Resources, George Salamis, President and CEO of Integra Resources, and Eva Trenker, Vice President of Auramet International. So perhaps, Elaine, we can go and close the poll and see who came out on top. It looks as if just marginally, Mark Cutifani of Anglo American with 28% just came out in front. So let's go around our panel and ask them, what's the one mining CEO who they admire the most and why? Perhaps I can turn to yourself first, Tim.
It's a very difficult question to answer. There's so many different sort of reasons why you would pick a particular person. Out of this group, I'd probably go Mark Cutifani or Mark Bristow. It's a mix between the two. I think the skill sets are similar in a way, although they have very different roles. One rebuilding a struggling company and one merging two gold giants. I think both a sense of connection to communities that they work. That's why they've been successful. So,
okay, Eva.
I really respect all of the candidates that you mentioned very much, but for me, the one that stands out in this list is Ross Beatty. I think he has the greatest body of work when it comes to seeing great opportunities and getting the timing and mining turnaround and developments right. He has done it many times. Whether it was with Pan American or Lumina or most recently with Equinox Gold. I think he has also done it with assets that have not worked for others. I think his record and consistency are unparalleled.
Yeah, definitely. And yourself, Michael?
I have to agree with Eva. I mean, Ross is really impressive from various standpoints. But to my mind, what Mark Bristow has done, particularly in the DRC, is just mind-boggling. And I'd have to put him at the top of the list.
George?
Yeah, I guess I'm the odd person out here. I went with Sean Boyd, and maybe there's a bit of personal bias. I know Sean. My first M&A deal was with Sean, selling him the Kittilä mine in Finland, but I got to know his management team. Sean runs a phenomenally tight ship in a well-disciplined fashion, and his management group, you know, it's very much a family, and I really liked everything I saw about his management style. So Sean was my pick.
Whilst we were sort of like the five of us were actually like talking beforehand, we said that if there was one problem with this list, it didn't sort of like, you know, cover any sort of like up and coming CEOs, whether they were working for mid tiers or like other firms. Perhaps kind of going to ask each of them, if you had to pick an up and coming CEO, who would you pick? And I'll just go to our panelists in reverse order. Perhaps yourself first, George.
Oh, geez. Yeah. So Christian Milo obviously works with Ross at Equinox. I think Christian is a phenomenal CEO. I think again he's sharp, he's disciplined, he's focused. He's done a great job at helping to get the company to where it's at. So he'd get my vote.
Mm-hmm. Michael?
Yeah, I think I'd go with Christian too. Sorry to be boring, but he's impressive.
Sure. Eva?
I agree. Christian is very impressive. I would also name Tony McCooch. What he did with Kirkland Lake Gold is really impressive.
And for yourself, Tim, sort of, I mean, the same question, but with a follow-on question, is like, who do you name as an up-and-coming CEO? But also, how does the leadership skills required for, say, an exploration company sort of differ for a large-scale producer?
I mean, I don't know whether necessarily up-and-coming, but sort of mid-tier stuff, you know, maybe Clive Johnson from B2 Gold, something like that. But I think that there are skill sets that are common across the board to do, you know, with the focus on managing your team, instilling the right sense of drive and passion for the business in your team. That goes across the board, irrespective of the size of the company. I think in the earlier stage companies, groups like ours, and sort of into the early mid tiers, the CEO perhaps has a lot more of a hands-on role on the interactions with the stakeholders, government, non-governmental, and I think trust and empathy and communication of your goals is almost more important at the earlier stage than you know, taking on a large ship. You don't have to worry so much. You've got a big team that you can delegate a lot of that to. But there are a lot of common skills, and obviously, you know, we all aspire to improve those and improve our teams as we go. So.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So let's move on to our first mining update of the show. So perhaps Elaine, you can just get the first slide for Oriole up on the screen. Just to briefly introduce Oriole. Oriole Resources is focused on early stage exploration in Cameroon and the more advanced Senala Gold Project in Senegal, where IAMGOLD has the option to spend $8 million US to earn a 70% interest. The company has a number of interests and royalties in companies operating throughout Africa and Turkey, and is assessing new opportunities in both regions. Tim Livesey, who we've already met, as the CEO. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Yeah, very briefly, you know, we are focused in our main assets focused in Cameroon and in Senegal. We're an early stage mover in Cameroon. We've been there for 2 years on a couple of projects which were new discoveries about a decade ago for a company called Reservoir Minerals, where I was previously the COO. And the assets in Cameroon we've expanded on this year. Cameroon is a new jurisdiction. The government there is proactively pushing the mining sector and trying to emulate what Senegal and Mali did in the 1990s. We do have some assets, some legacy assets from our previous incarnation. The current management team and board have only been together for 2 years, and we have some legacy assets which are essentially some royalties in Turkey and some investments in some gold assets in East Africa, Egypt and Djibouti primarily. So on the next slide, we have just a zoom in on our assets in Cameroon. We have 2 licenses in the north, Bibemi and Wapuzi, and we've had quite a lot of success on extending the anomalous gold that was discovered by Reservoir back in 2012 We did a pretty advanced trenching program there in the last season, and we've got some really good grab sample results, over sort of 100 grams a ton from grab samples. But trenching, obviously, the volume is what you need, and our best results to date are 9 meters at just over 3 grams. So we have at Bibemi, we have a central core zone about 6 kilometers long, which has a number of interesting hits all the way along it, cohesive anomalies running from trench to trench up the trend. And we'll be doing our maiden drill program there later this year. We're just looking at mobilizing a rig now to give us some vertical control on the systems and to understand the structure a little bit better. We've also got 8 licenses under application in central Cameroon. And this is a contiguous land package of 3,500 square kilometers. It's on a splay off the central Cameroon shear zone. And it's an area of known gold anomalism from previous mapping in the 1960s and 70s. But it's really ticks the boxes for what we consider to be new frontiers, important for new frontiers gold for these orogenic systems. It's got the right rocks, it's got the right alteration, it's got the right structural regime, and it's got evidence of mineralization on those 8 licenses. So we believe there's an opportunity in Cameroon because it's been pretty much overlooked. Everybody's been in Senegal, Mali, Burkina for the last 15 to 20 years. And we believe the opportunity is there to get in, pick up large pieces of ground. This is potentially a district scale play. And we've got a great partner there and a good relationship with the government. So Cameroon's our main focus of our own team. And then moving on to the next slide, we have 1 license in Senegal, but it's a particularly important license. It's in the middle of the KK inlier, and it's essentially surrounded by about 50 million ounces of gold prospectivity and mining. We are immediately west of IAMGOLD's Balto project in the south, and immediately west of the recent discoveries from Integra Resources in the north. We've got 5 targets on this license. The license is nearly 500 square kilometers, and we had a renewal on the license last year. So we've got a 10-year exploration window on this license now. And we have a joint venture running with IAMGOLD. They're earning in to a maximum 70% ultimately. The license is under JV between ourselves and a local company, EMC. And they've spent the first 2 years looking in the south at our Medina Bafe and Sarudia targets, which are close to potentially satellite deposits to the Balto mine development project. And this year, in the 3rd year, they've moved up to the north, and they're looking in the Fare area. And this is an area that we drilled previously, our company had drilled previously in the prior incarnation. And we'd had some really good intercepts. We've got a 6.5 kilometer striking gold anomalism with some great hits in there, 7 meters at 1.6, 23 meters at 1.4, 96 meters at 1.5. Certainly the potential for a standalone gold mine or gold resource in this northern area. So Senegal is perhaps carrying the bulk of our value at the moment, but it is more advanced, and we're free carried on that. IAMGOLD are earning in onto that. So we put our eggs into the Cameroon basket at the moment, and very happy to be carried along on this by IAMGOLD, and also happy to have the opportunity to chase up some value on some of those legacy assets. We have a portfolio of royalties in Turkey, which we've started to monetize. We sold one off recently. And we also have some investments in East Africa, Egypt and Djibouti through a private company. And they've been advancing as well. So we're quite well placed, we think, to maximize the value of being first movers in Cameroon, and at the same time have value support from projects like Senegal and from these other asset realizations.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. First question that's been sent in by Jacob Ambrose Wilson of Resource Global Network is actually to do with the fact of you being an early mover in Cameroon, which is of course one of West Africa's lesser known gold jurisdictions. Have you faced any teething issues in Cameroon, and how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, you always do, irrespective of whether it's a new jurisdiction or an existing jurisdiction. As a new company coming in, you'll always have to build relationships with your partners, with the government, find your way around the regulatory process and so on. Cameroon has developed a new mining law as part of this drive to attract investment. They took a World Bank loan about 6 years ago, and they've been working with the Finnish Geological Survey, GTK, to put in a new mining law and a new licensing structure. So there's now a live cadastre system for monitoring your licenses on the web. And there's also a prospectivity work by BRGM, so countrywide mapping, geophysics, geochemistry, and so on. So teething problems, I would say that the licensing process is new. It's new to the ministry as well as new to us. And the licenses have been progressed very successfully. They've taken perhaps a little bit longer than normal with the COVID impact. And well, we assume it's the COVID impact, but we're coming up to granting central licenses and renewal on existing licenses. They've been through all the ministry steps so far without a hitch. It's just taken a little bit longer than perhaps normal. We haven't been able to fly out to meet with the people to push them through. We've been leaving it in the hands of our local partner. Cameroon is under-resourced from a support point of view on the mining industry. Access to things like RC drill rigs, diamond drill rigs, has resulted in us having to look for importing equipment rather than being able to use local rigs, that sort of thing. So minor issues like that, nothing truly significant, and nothing really that you don't get anywhere else. It's just half of the problems could be down to the COVID delays. We haven't been able to get on the ground there for the last 4 months. Partially, it could be that there's just new systems in place and everybody's getting used to them. But we've been very impressed with the way things are going.
A couple of questions have been sent in about delivering shareholder value. Can you just go into a bit of depth as to what is your business plan to deliver shareholder value? Most projects have long lead times. So how much dilution is required before delivery of a resource in either Cameroon or Senegal, Tim?
Well, this is always the problem with early stage exploration or early stage explorers, is the timeline from initial concept to testing the concept to producing a resource to then taking it forward perhaps to a scoping study or a PEA. There are ways of shortening that timeline. They usually involve throwing more money at things. It's the usual triangle of quality, speed, and cost. And you can choose two of those, but you can't always have all three. It's going to cost you a lot of money to get good quality very quickly. So our timeline in Cameroon specifically, we have 2 stages. We have the really early stage stuff in central Cameroon, and we believe we'll start to see some good results from our early targeting that we've been doing desktop work in the last couple of months. We've got some great targets to chase in central Cameroon. And we believe that'll be recognized by the longer term, more stable investors. In northern Cameroon, we're at the stage where we're now mobilizing to do a drill program, so we should get results out of that pretty quickly. And if we have a vertical extent to what we're seeing on surface, and importantly, if we're able to prove widths to these things rather than just grades, then we're off to the races to pull a resource together pretty quickly. Senegal is a little more frustrating. Obviously, IAMGOLD are doing things to their own schedule. And although they have expenditure commitments, their first 2 years were focused in where we have the 2 targets that could potentially be satellite pits for Balto. They're only now in the 3rd year moving into Fare, which is probably the best target on the license. And the drilling that they're doing there is going to supplement the work that we did back in 2014, 15, 16. We're not too many holes away from starting to put a resource together on that, but of course, we don't dictate the drill program. We're not paying for it. We don't dictate where the holes are going to go. So the route to value on Sonala is really contingent on the progress that IAMGOLD makes to a certain extent, unless they or somebody else wishes to come in and put a bid in on it, obviously. It's a very prospective piece of ground. But to answer the question about reducing dilution and to sort of maintain the value to the shareholder, we've done a number of different things in the last 2 years. You know, the first thing we did as a management team was do a massive reduction in G&A costs in the company. Over halved, we more than halved the G&A costs in the running costs of the company. We've also gone into this system of asset realization for a lot of the legacy assets, which quite frankly are a distraction to us. We've been putting in place systems to cash those in, so we can use money that we're generating from our own asset sales to support the exploration, rather than doing very large raises, which would be massively dilutive. That's been quite successful to date. And we've also been a little bit smart. Our financial controls, Bob Smeaton, our CFO, has been able to persuade Her Majesty's government that we are liable for tax rebates for research and development. And to date, we've got over £300,000 back from the government in tax rebates. So we are being very, very careful with the investors' money, primarily because it's our money too. We're all invested in this company. But we do recognise those long lead concerns of the shareholders, and we're doing everything we can to reduce the impact of that. But the reality is that the uplift, for example, in Cameroon, or if we were to, you know, be made an offer on Senegal, the potential uplift to the investor would be huge. You know, if we are successful in tying up a new district in Cameroon, and we're able to prove that the targets hang together, then it's going to be worth a lot more than just having one license in the middle of the KK inlier. It's like owning half the KK inlier. So the impact there is massive.
And maybe there's time for just one last question. The Mali-Senegal border is red hot from an M&A perspective at the moment, with some significant gold discoveries, exploration results near to Oriole's Senala license. So why has this not been reflected in the Oriole share price, given that the company holds one of the largest exploration licenses in the region?
Well, again, I think it's down to the fact that IAMGOLD are controlling the work plan. You know, we get a monthly update on what's happening, but we don't have the ability to dictate where they put the boreholes. I think everybody is expecting to see a decision on the Balto mine development project. IAMGOLD keep referring to it. They had an announcement out this morning in their Q2. They're continuing to invest. They're putting civil infrastructure in for the access roads, for the process plant and the tailings. But they haven't formally, although it's permitted and licensed, they haven't formally gone to the market and said, we are building Balto. They're still in the phase of trying to understand the value add from our license to the west, from the new Karita discovery to the south and in that area. And I think once they consolidate what they're going to do and they can scale Balto to be appropriate to what they've got access to, then we'll see a massive re-rate coming out of Senegal on our project.
Mm-hmm. Just moving to investor guests, Eva and Michael, do you have any investments in Africa? And if so, how do you manage some of the risk associated with African mining investments? Perhaps I could turn to yourself first, Eva.
Yeah, Africa has been our fastest growth area in terms of offtake, and we have also done a number of investments in Africa. For us, the star performers were Rox Gold in Burkina Faso, Hummingbird in Mali, Trenker in Senegal and Burkina Faso, and the Bonikro mine in the Ivory Coast. For us, to manage the risk in Africa, it was most important for us to have a lot of contacts on the ground. We have an experienced representative in South Africa. We talk a lot to local security carriers and so on. And for a lot of times, we can actually see issues. And when I say issues, I mean safety problems or bureaucratic delays in country, for exports, we can see such issues ahead and prepare ourselves accordingly.
Sure. And yourself, Michael?
At the moment, we don't have anything in Africa, but in the past, I've been involved in some African projects, and obviously, the local contact is critical there, because the right local partner can make or break the relationship with the community, with the government, and give you good advice or bad advice. So it really, I think everything hinges on that. And then obviously some countries, the inherent risk factor is greater, and so the rate of return that you're looking for has to be much higher. But I think that wherever you are, your local partner is critical.
And I was just wondering, either yourself, Michael, or Eva, do you have any kind of questions for Tim?
I'd like to know what it is that concerns you the most about your operation in Cameroon, because as you said, it's kind of a black box for the mining industry. There isn't anybody that's been there that has done something that is notable. In fact, it's almost a forgotten area. So
it exactly is, and that's really one of the things that attracted us. I spent quite a long time when I used to work for Barrick Gold looking for new frontiers for gold exploration. And Cameroon really ticks a lot of the boxes for exactly the reason that it has been overlooked. It's got the right geology, it's got mineralization, it's got all the evidence you need. But as is often the case in new frontiers, the reason they've not been researched and explored up until now is usually either security or political or corruption or one of the other factors that typically hold you back. Cameroon has changed around. Yes, yeah, a combination of a few of those. So Cameroon's changed its position recently with this World Bank investment. Away from being supported from an extractives point of view. They've seen what happened in Senegal and Mali in the 90s when the World Bank sponsored programs there to promote investment. So, we saw, a couple of years ago, we saw the opportunity, we got involved. Last year, we saw Auramet, the French multinational industrial minerals company. Auramet has moved in. They're busy working retail licenses in Cameroon. So we're starting to see larger companies coming in. We're also starting to see the junior space open up. There were a few followers in when Reservoir Minerals, when we went in previously in 2010-11 with Reservoir Minerals, there were a few companies followed us in then. Altus Strategies in its incarnation then, Avasoro.
I think we may be slightly losing Tim here.
How's that? Is it breaking up, Andrew?
Yeah. So we've kind of like got you back again. We just lost you for 5 seconds, Tim.
Okay. So we've seen the smaller companies that came in behind Auramet and behind ourselves. We've seen them come back in now. There's a lot more activity now, and we are also working with the government, the ministry, the Cameroon Chamber of Business, the Cameroon Small Miners Association, British High Commission, the French High Commission, French Ambassadorial, the DFID, governmental and non-governmental groups to really help Cameroon establish that investment into the sector. So I think it's changing quickly. We're right on the cusp of it. It is a risk, but we're right on the cusp of it, and that's where you see the best returns.
Okay. And Eva, do you have a kind of a quick question for Tim?
Yes, I do. We have a very close relationship with Trenker, who have the Sabodala operation in Senegal, and now with the recent Massawa acquisition from Balto. The last 3 years, we took real country risk in Senegal by providing Trenker with unsecured gold prepayments in the aggregate over 50 million. And we have found Senegal to be a real winner with very few issues. I would be curious to hear your own experience working in Senegal, and also what did you think, or what has been your greatest challenge so far working there?
I would agree that Senegal is a very advanced destination for exploration and mining investment, and I think the success and growth recently in M&A of all of the companies in that area really reflects that the governor is proactively pushing investment in Senegal. I think from our side, we really put this to the test last year. The Sonala license was previously called Dalafin, and last year it was coming to the end of its tenure. We had an opportunity to extend it for another 2 years, but we would have had to relinquish quite a lot, and that would have been the end of the license. And we were able, with our partner, going back to Michael's earlier comment about having a good local partner, with our partner in Senegal, we were able to lobby the ministry, and we were able to relinquish and then reapply for the entire footprint as a brand new license. The government has respected that we have continued to bring investment into that license. So we're not just holding it for nothing, we are progressing it. And we've got another 10 years tenure on it now. So I think the government really proactively is supporting, they've realized the value, the positive value that mining can bring. And this is why Cameroon is looking to Senegal and Mali as a model for copying exactly what they did, using World Bank loans back in the 90s to stabilize the investment into the Cameroonian mining sector. So, we think Senegal is a good place to be. We're very happy to be there. We've got a great partner and a great investor with IAMGOLD. And we look forward to Cameroon being in the same place a decade from now, and us being a major player by that stage.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. So let's move on to our second poll. Lane, perhaps we can have our second poll up on the screen. We're hearing a lot about gold at the moment. However, certainly in my conversation with investors, I'm seeing increasing interest in silver. So your polling question is, where will the price of silver be by the end of 2020? Again, you've got 5 options there: below US dollar, $19 an ounce, $20 to $22 an ounce, $23 to $26 an ounce, $27 to $29 an ounce, or above $30 per ounce. Whilst you're voting, let me introduce George Salamis in our second mining update. Integra Resources is a development stage mining company focused on the exploration and de-risking of the past-producing Delamar Gold-Silver project in Idaho, USA. Integra Resources is led by the management team from Integra Gold Corp, which successfully grew, developed, and sold the Delamar Project in Quebec for 600 million Canadian dollars in 2017. George has been the president and CEO for just over 3 years. Can we please have the results of the poll up? And it seems a lot of you are quite silver bugs, expecting the price of silver to be over $30 per ounce. Over to you, George. How would you have voted?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So in the last 3 years, I have declared myself a silver bug, and that's only because we own a lot of it at Delamar. I mean, little known fact amongst our shareholders, and they're quite surprised when we mention this. We actually have 120 million ounces of silver down at Delamar, in addition to being a multi-million ounce gold project. So I'm really bullish on silver, and for the same reasons that I'm bullish on gold. I see sort of a combination of interest rates being very low for the next 2 years because of what's going on worldwide with the pandemic and the resulting damage. I see looming inflation, again, pandemic derived, and I see a lot of currency devaluation at the end of the day. And so if you look at the sort of silver relative to gold, there's a set ratio that an average ratio that silver is traded relative to gold, 80 or 85 to 1. So on that basis, if you look at $2,500 gold by year end as being, you know, not too fantastic and crazy, then, you know, that would imply $29, $30 or more for silver price. So I'm quite bullish on silver, obviously, because again, we own a lot of it. So just maybe jumping into the Delamar project and the project that we have down in southwestern Idaho. Elaine, if you wouldn't mind just jumping to the next slide. I think to understand Delamar, our principal asset down in Idaho, really sort of, you have to look at the notion of scarcity of big assets, big resource projects in tier 1 jurisdictions. So we had our friends at National Bank run a bit of a project screen for us, starting off simply looking at, you know, anything, any resource asset that has gold or silver that's been declared around the world, and it turns out there are about 3,500 of those assets. But one of the amazing things that you see is that as you start to apply certain screens to these assets, you know, remove all the projects without a valid economic study that have been done since 2015, remove all the projects with less than 50% precious metals production, remove all the projects that have less than 100,000 ounces of gold equivalent production, less than 10-year mine life, and an important one, remove all the projects that are outside of a tier 1 jurisdiction, and that being, you know, the US or Canada or Australia. And then finally, remove all the projects that have an initial capex of $500 million or greater. You only get to 5 projects, and we're in a privileged position to be one of those. So there's a real issue of scarcity right now going on in the industry, and that's kind of where we sit. We are an advanced explorer resource developer. And we fit that niche with a very large 4.5 million ounce gold equivalent resource in southwestern Idaho. Elaine, if you wouldn't mind turning to the next slide, that'd be great. So there are a number of metrics that you could use to sort of benchmark ourselves. But, you know, I think the one that stands out the most for me is one that talks about this hallmark of what Delamar is. And one of the really important things for us when we did our first economic study on Delamar last year was we could have perhaps shown our investors a larger production profile, a larger milling scenario, perhaps that produced more gold and silver than we did in the PA. But what was really important for us in our first study was to come out with a project that was one that was credible, not only from a we can finance it perspective, but also we can build it perspective. So it was really important for us to come out with a project that had a pretty decent production profile, 125,000 ounces per year of gold equivalent. 80% of that, by the way, is derived from gold and the balance from silver. But one that has a capex, or a very low capital intensity. You know, our aiming mark was under 200 million US to build this project. And in fact, the initial capex came in at 161. So this is a great graph. It basically benchmarks us against other similar assets around the world, not only in tier 1 jurisdictions, but it looks at, for every dollar that's invested in this project, what's the return? So, you know, what this shows is 1350 gold and I think 1690 silver is what we used as an input price on our PA. With an initial capex of $160 million US, for every dollar invested, you get $2.2 back per the PEA at 1350 gold. If you're looking at now, obviously, sort of gold prices above 1,800 and silver prices, you know, in the low to mid 20s, you know, you're looking at a 4x effect on that. So, you know, really for us, one of the key hallmarks of this great project in Idaho is low capital intensity, and this graph speaks to that. If you wouldn't mind, Elaine, the next slide, that'd be great. And so, just to kind of summarize here, what the project looked like 3 years ago when we sold Integra Gold for $600 million. The same management team jumped into Integra Resources. We acquired this asset from Kinross. 3 years ago, there was no resource estimate done, no declared resource estimate anyway. We had a sense that there was a very large one there. If you roll the clock forward to today, 3.9 million ounces of gold equivalent and another 500,000 ounces of inferred. So about 90% of the total 4.5 million ounce gold equivalent resource is M&I category. So that's a lot of work that we don't need to do to bring this to feasibility, which is great. 3 years ago, we didn't know a lot about metallurgy. There was a Kinross milled happily for about 20 years, got great recoveries. However, we were looking at this project from a heap leach perspective. And we had to understand that the metallurgy of specifically the oxidation profile, the oxide and the transition material with respect to heap leaching. So we know a lot more about that now, and we'll continue to grow that body of evidence that shows that this is very much a heap leachable project, or from a processing perspective. We didn't have a sense about what the PEA looked like or what the potential economics looked like. And then so we put out our first PEA study in September of last year, NPV5 of about 472 million Canadian dollars. And that was at the then 1350 gold price and 1690 silver price. If you start plugging in those same numbers, if you start plugging in $1,800 gold and say $20 silver and above, you're starting to approach the $1 billion NPV5 mark. So it's a great project that's obviously just going to get better with increasing gold prices. One of the things that we were as well really focused on was, yes, we want to advance this project to pre-feasibility and then go into permitting, and then come to a point where it comes time to make a decision to build. But at the same time, we wanted to push the envelope of exploration, because we wanted to avoid that the key pitfall of what we call the Lassonde curve, which is you declare yourselves as simply an asset developer. You lose the exploration sizzle and upside, and you lose half an investment audience, and vice versa. So we wanted to do both, and that was key for us. We did a lot of exploration, and we've actually grown the exploration potential on various fronts, which I'm happy to talk about a bit later. And then, along the way, we kept our institutional shareholder base constant from Integra Gold to Integra Resources. So those resource funds who made a lot of money on us in Integra 1.0 jumped in on Integra 2.0, in addition to Coeur Mining, our sole corporate shareholder. They own 5%. And then last but not least, a pretty healthy treasury as of today, about $26 million. More than enough for us to fulfill what we need to fulfill in terms of the march towards pre-feasibility and all the big exploration plans we have for the balance of this year. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
I think you sort of recently began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Can you just give us a little bit of a background about what was your thinking about deciding to list on the New York Stock Exchange?
Yeah, exciting time. So that listing triggered Friday of last week. So it's been just under a week now. Through the course of marketing Integra through the U.S., we'd often run into U.S. retail shareholders who love the story because it's in their own backyard, right? It's Idaho, it's the Western U.S. They understand the U.S. However, buying a Canadian stock for a U.S. retail investor can be difficult. Not all of them can do it easily. So for us, it was a bit of a no-brainer, really, in responding to that shareholder demand. By going to the NYSE listing, we're providing much enhanced, easier access for U.S. retail primarily, and institutions, but U.S. retail. And simply put, that's why we did what we did.
Just bringing in investors, I was just wondering, Eva, do you have a question for George?
Yes, George, Idaho has had a great silver history, but we haven't seen a recent compelling project. So how do you see the state political situation to move your project forward, and what has been the most difficult so far for you?
So in terms of the state's backing of gold mining, generally speaking, the whatever issues of the past that have arisen have not come at the state level. They basically come by way of NGO opposition or slowdowns and bureaucracy at the federal level. The state they are solid backers of gold and silver mining in general in Idaho. And case in point, when we first listed the company 3 years ago, we had the governor of the state and the lieutenant governor and his entire entourage take us and other mining companies around to to Bay Street and Wall Street to promote Idaho as a great mining jurisdiction. So, they're very, very supportive, always an open door, and that's been our experience thus far. With respect to gold mining or permitting of gold mining projects in Idaho, you're quite right. We haven't seen one for a while now, probably 20 years plus. There is active gold mining on the go in the northern part of the state. Obviously, Hecla Mining is mining in northern Idaho. With respect to mine permitting in general, so there's some very large mining projects that are being actively mined right now. One that was permitted about 300 miles to the east of us, not a gold project, a very large phosphate project, but it will be an open pit mine that, in terms of scale, that will be several times larger than what we envisage. So the state is actually actively permitting mining operations right now. Given our location, southwestern part of the state, high, dry, semi-arid desert, 5,000 to 7,500 feet of altitude, much more like northern Nevada than it is, what you'd classically think of Idaho. We don't think that we're going to have a lot of, huge impasses to permitting in the future. And it is a previously mined disturbed site as well. So. And
Michael, do you have a question for George?
Well, an observation and a question. You're on a fast track there in terms of building up resources, and you're getting close to that magical number of 5 million ounces that begins to be of interest to some bigger companies. This has many of the hallmarks of a build and sell operation, which is no bad thing. I mean, as you've proven in the past, at the right price, it can be a very good thing for shareholders. But right now, I suppose my question is, are you thinking of you bringing this mine into production? Because you're acting as if you do.
Yeah, indeed, and we are, and I think to pay homage to that point, you have to look at the pedigree of the company, which is Integra Gold, and few people maybe realized how close we were to actually going into official mine development before we were taken over by Eldorado. So we had the management team that was clearly devoted and focused on going into production, building up an asset first. We were underground in Integra Gold, happily test mining underground. We had we started to acquire mining fleet. We had acquired a mill out of bankruptcy, which we were going to use. So we were firmly on the path towards, developing and operating a deposit on our own. Integra 2.0 or Integra Resources is no different. We're committed to that in the end of the day. But you're quite right. We are getting to that size, if you will, where we might become an attraction to a major at some times. For us, it's really important as a company to not stand still. In other words, I could not be part of anything that declares itself as, okay, here we are, we've got a very large resource, we're doing nothing else, and please take me over, right? You can be waiting for an awful long time, and you can destroy a lot of value in that process, and that's not what we're all about. We're about the optionality.
To get a good price, you have to look like you're going to go into production.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
So kind of so just to sort of pin you down on that one, because there's a question here from Carl Newman, George. Is your end game at Integra? Is it building or selling?
It's de-risking the project, taking it as far as we can on our own, and if that means taking it into production, absolutely. Is it going to cost a fortune to build? That's the beauty of this project. No. Oh. Is it a very complex project to build? Absolutely not. It's all off the shelf mining methodology and processing technology. So very, relatively speaking, easy for us to build, and that's the end game for us.
Changing tack, I see that you've been involved in a charity initiative of raising $100,000 for food banks in British Columbia. Is this part of the increasing need for mining companies to be more socially aware?
Oh, indeed, yeah. And this is the amazing thing about that initiative, about a few other initiatives, which I'll mention in a second. None of these things cost a lot of money, but they're huge contributors to to societies in your own backyard. And I think that's really important, a really important point to stress. So social support in your own backyard doesn't need to cost a lot of money. And in the case of our two backyards, being one British Columbia, where our office is, where management is, and then Idaho, these two great initiatives that we started. So the food bank contributions in British Columbia didn't cost us a lot of money. It was just an awareness campaign, and we helped raise that money along with the EBC and others. That was excellent. And then in Idaho, we had two initiatives actually. One called Kurds for Kindness, where we were basically taking unused milk products and donating them to shelters and handing them out in a time of need during COVID, when the food banks in Idaho were really stretched thin. And that, again, didn't cost us a lot. And then basically a grocery buying initiative in the community close to Delamar, basically buying groceries for the elderly or those who were immuno-challenged, so that they didn't have to go out shopping for their own when the pandemic was really taking off. Again, these were great initiatives that really didn't cost a lot of money. So yes, Andrew, to answer your first question, I think there's a lot that the mining companies can do, particularly in our own backyards.
Yeah. Okay. Tim, how important is ESG to you? What ESG initiatives does Oriole have?
It's critical, and I think George has really hit the nail on the head. It doesn't have to cost much. It's about understanding the need and then putting in place something that has the maximum impact. The days are past where mining companies used to measure their social interaction by how much money they spent each year. It's not about that. It's about the impact that you have on a day-to-day basis. Oriole, we're early stage. We're really greenfield, grassroots explorers. So most of our interactions are out in the field at a stakeholder level, sort of in the villages. We are working with the Cameroonian Chamber of Business and with the Cameroonian Small Miners Association to help develop a Chamber of Mines, or redevelop the Chamber of Mines in Cameroon, with a particular focus on small-scale mining. That's one of the things that we believe we can add some value to, just from adding some organizational input and some support and ideas that we've seen in other countries, seen work well in other countries. There is, in a lot of West Africa, there's a lot of artisanal activity, and you're never going to stop it. So the best way to have a positive impact, we believe, is to work with them and help them develop systems that are more efficient for them, but also less impactful on the environment, and personally a lot safer for the workers. Cameroon has a history of alluvial gold mining in the east, in the rivers that flow out from the areas that we're looking. And at the moment, they're mainly large-scale dredging operations with mechanized backhoes and so on. So the small miners don't really get much of a look in. But yeah, it's pretty much small-scale stuff, boots on the ground interactions, and George has absolutely hit the nail on the head. Doesn't have to cost much. You can have a massive positive impact just by taking the first step of sitting with the community, finding out what the need is, and then seeing how you can help them address that need.
Mm-hmm. Michael, Eva, how did you prioritize ESG criteria when making an investment decision? Perhaps I can turn to you first, Michael.
Oh, it's become essential. You have to find out that the management understands, as these two gentlemen have demonstrated, how this impacts the whole process. There was a time long ago when things like permitting were just a given. Oh, well, we got a permit for this. And then we realized, well, no, not necessarily. And so ESG has become like that, a necessary box to tick. And you need to engage with the management and make sure they understand it. I got so tired in earlier years of hearing people say, oh, well, we built a school. Yeah, you built a hut. And then what? You didn't pay for the teacher. Or we built a clinic, but you didn't provide the nurse and the medicine. That's that's in the past. You know, going forward, you have to really have an impact on the communities.
I have a great sorry to jump in, Andrew, but I have a great example of that, Michael, from when I was with Barrick and Antofagasta in Pakistan. And the previous company had built a schoolhouse, and they'd built a clinic house, and they'd put a doctor in place. We did a health impact study when we first arrived to understand the needs in the community. And of course, this was a very tribal area, and the majority of the health issues were amongst it was related to childbirth amongst the females. And of course, the doctor was male, and they did not go to the doctor. So for a very small financial donation, we were able to train 5 local ladies as what they class over there as female health volunteers, basically like a early stage midwife training. And that was in 2007. And I know for a fact those 5 ladies are still working in the community. It was a one-off hit, a few $1,000s. They are still working in the community. They're still adding value. You really do have to change your outlook. And I think most companies are doing this now, but it has been a transition over the last decade or so.
And Eva, how does Auramet prioritize ESG when it comes to making investments?
It's always an important part of our investment decision, because ultimately miners that ignore their social and environmental responsibility, they will take a financial hit, because if you don't take care of your workers, you are at risk of having, you know, labor problems, strikes, and accidents. And if you don't take care of the environment, you're in the danger of you know, having spills and getting fined. So for us, we put a real effort to make sure we only work with companies that act socially, environmentally responsible.
And just to wrap up today's 5 at 5, we've obviously heard a lot about gold and silver. I'm just wondering, I mean, again, Eva, what is your outlook for gold and silver for the next 12 months?
I mean, there is a lot of interest in precious metals. Precious metals ETFs are booming, and between the pandemic and US elections in November, there is so much uncertainty that you know, we believe that that silver and gold will remain strong for the rest of the year, for sure.
Michael?
Well, I said earlier that I'm agnostic on the price of metals, and it is what it is. But one thing that I have to say is that, you know, when someone like Integra has done economics on the basis of 1,350 gold, and they have a nice return on that, that's the sort of thing you're looking for. You know, a project should balance on much, you know, the most sort of reasonable pessimistic view of future prices, because, you know, if you get above that, it's only getting better.
Mm-hmm. And then just on gold, just turning to you again, George, to what extent has the rising gold price been mainly responsible for Integra's rising share price this year? Or is it more, or would you argue it's more to do with your sort of like tier 1 asset?
I would argue, yes, it's probably more the latter. This realization that tier 1 asset in a tier 1 jurisdiction, and that scarcity fact has probably been a better driver of share price. In addition to, I think the thing that moves our share price more than anything else, we could declare all these great NPVs and IRRs, but there's nothing like a good high-grade drill intercept to really capture the investor's imagination. And boy, that's certainly helped us out a lot.
Mm-hmm. And to you, Tim, I mean, do you think that are we on a similar gold run to what we saw between 2007 and 2012?
Well, I think with the typical reaction to sort of global uncertainty, rising gold prices is baked in, isn't it? It was interesting to test $2,000 and to go above it. I don't know where the new base where the new foundation will lie, whether it'll drop back down below 2,000 anytime soon. there's been a lot in the last 12 months, 18 months. There's been a lot of central bank gold buying, perhaps with a view to having some stability for exactly the sort of economic straits that we're now in. I'd like to see gold stay. Obviously, I'd like to see it stay high. I don't think massive volatility in the gold price is really good for the junior sector. You get very, it's the land of the pump and dump. If you get a gold price that's bouncing up and down like that, it's much better to be stable, but stable at a higher level would be good. I think, the comment earlier on from Michael about baking in projects at a reasonable mid to long term price will always get the project support. I think that's fundamental. Under promise, over deliver. And I think a stable gold price, reasonable stable gold price will help with that rather than bouncing around.
And I think that on that note, we'll kind of leave the last word to Tim. So many thanks to our guests, many thanks to our sponsors, Oriole Resources and the Resource Group Network, and most of all to you, the audience. Our next episode will be at 5 p.m. Hong Kong time on the 13th of August. All of you will also be sent details of our up and coming Minds and Money online global event, which runs from the 31st of August to the 3rd of September. We already have over 80 mining corporates signed up, and some cracking keynotes from the likes of Mark Bristow, Tom Palmer, Ara Thomas, Randy Smallwood, Sean Rooson, and Peter Marone. The event is free of charge to attend. Until then, stay safe. Thank you very much.